Too many of us are willing to avoid cemeteries because they remind us of death. I suggest there is nothing morbid in taking a walk among the departed. Quite the contrary. It is good for the soul. You can read the simple and brief inscriptions that perpetuate the memories of those departed, and you might experience a voice that speaks and asks simply, "Do you remember me?" Former Governor and Chuckatuck native Mills Godwin. Suffolk is a city built on leaf and lumber, with a history dating back to when all America was Virginia. Recently, the remnants of a fort were unearthed on land in northern Suffolk slated for residential development. This fort is believed to be evidence of the first English settlement in Virginia's largest city, and the beginning of a Suffolk story. If Jamestown had been all founder John Smith hoped, Suffolk might have had a different story. In 1609, fearing his settlers would starve, Captain Smith sent 100 men to establish a farming community on the Nansemond River. Nansemond is an Indian word meaning fishing point, and the native residents were less than pleased to share this point with their new English neighbors. The Indians drove them off. But by 1622, the English had declared war on the Nansemond Indians, and within 10 years, colonists' farms were scattered along the waterways. Farming ruled the economy, and tobacco was king. In fact, the colonists grew so much that they had to build warehouses to store it all. The main warehouse was owned by John Constant, and this led in part to petitioning the colonial legislature to establish a town there.
Inasmuch as it hath been represented unto this General Assembly that great numbers of people have lately settled themselves at and near a place called Constant's Warehouse on the east side of the Nansemond River, where the public and warehouses are built, which place is healthful, commodious, and convenient for traders to cohabitate in and bring their goods to, and that in case a town was laid out there, trade and navigation would be greatly encouraged and increased.
In 1742, Suffolk town was born. The name changed from Constant's Warehouse to honor Virginia Governor William Gooch's home county of Suffolk, England. And beyond tobacco, the new town's economy was aided by its proximity to water and its abundance of trees.
Fortunately, we discovered lumber. We had plenty of that, and that became the backbone of our economy. Everything that came from a tree. We made shingles and shipped them everywhere, and we cut the lumber, and we used tar and pitch and turpentine. Turpentine was a big commodity.
That industry would soon be Suffolk's temporary downfall. Suffolk, led by Colonel Willis Riddick, joined the new nation to fight for independence from the Crown. The British attacked the town, which boasted a shipyard and stockpile of military supplies.
They set the shipyard and the barrels of tar on fire, and all the houses in Suffolk were wooden houses, and it was easy when the houses were built so close together for the fire to spread. So that's what we did in the Revolutionary War. Our town was burned. Willis Riddick was supposed to be in charge of the militia to guard the town, and he did his best, but we were burned.
Suffolk also helped start the Revolution by driving Parson Agnew out of Glebe Church.
And when we drove the Bishop of London's appointee out, that was the equivalent of driving the king out. And particularly when the reason was that he was loyal to the king. So we can really say that that was among the opening blasts of the Revolution on the south side of the James River.
After the states won their independence, Suffolk town was rebuilt, better than ever. In 1819, steamboat lines began regular runs between Suffolk and Smithfield. In 1835, the first railroad came to the area. The first newspaper, the Suffolk Intelligencer, went to the presses shortly thereafter. Truck farming, or produce farming, ruled the economy in areas like Driver. And although slavery was common, freed blacks were able to purchase and farm their own properties. For villages on the water, Crittenden and Eclipse, oysters were big business. Residents either did that or supported it by building and fixing boats.
Built all the transportation, all the farm products that were sent to Norfolk or wherever had to be done by boat, and watermen and boats fairly well ruled the place at that point.
One of Virginia's most unique natural treasures was also an important part of Suffolk's history. The Great Dismal Swamp is 400,000 acres, extending into both Virginia and North Carolina. 65,000 of these acres make up Nansemond County's eastern sector.
It was a huge part of the economy. For this particular part of Nansemond County, there was quite a settlement out there. You know, George Washington thought it was important enough to invest in it, he and his family, and the Dismal Swamp Land Company. And as somebody said one time, it probably was just the thing to do. If the Washingtons did it, everybody else should do it too.
Colonel William Byrd named the swamp when he surveyed the area in 1728. Although that task was probably dismal, the swamp isn't. It's the home of bears and deer, insects and birds, ferns, trees, and flowers. The juniper-colored water was said to have medicinal value, and residents regularly extracted it for sale. The swamp was a favorite location for hunting, and oddly enough, honeymooning. Lake Drummond Hotel was constructed in the swamp in 1832, and in addition to attracting newlyweds, it was also one of the few places where dueling was still allowed. As part of the South, Suffolk and Nansemond County sent many men in support of the Confederate cause. And as the location of railroads and rivers that were crucial links for supplies and men, the area was the site of almost daily skirmishes.
As we were coming in and were almost in Fort Nansemond, the rebel sharpshooters across the river opened on us, and one ball whistled past me and the file leader, striking the ground close by. It was rather too close to be safe, and I think the Rebs were very impudent to fire at us when we were not troubling them.
Union soldier Solomon Augustus Lenfist, 6th Massachusetts Infantry. In 1862, Suffolk fell to the Union. Benjamin Riddick surrendered Suffolk to Colonel Dodge with the assurances that peaceable citizens' rights would be protected. The siege of Suffolk lasted over a year. It was lifted when General James Longstreet withdrew to help General Lee.
From gentlemen who have arrived from Suffolk, we learn that the last of the Yankees left Suffolk the night of the 3rd instant, the town having been occupied by them for 13 months and 20 days. Persons who have visited the town since the departure of the Vandals say they would scarcely recognize it, so altered is everything.
The Petersburg Express, July 9, 1863. Many men never returned to see the changes. A monument in Cedar Hill Cemetery commemorates the Suffolk and Nansemond County men who died in the Civil War. In 1870, Virginia re-entered the Union. In many ways, better times were ahead. After the Civil War, Suffolk became a growing commercial power. It had banks, railroads, ferries, a city market, and booming industry. Stores sold shoes, jewelry, gasoline, anything you needed. And then there were peanuts. peanuts grew well in Holland and other parts of Nansemond County. As the industry grew, the technology improved. There were peanut diggers, shellers, stemmers, pickers, polishers, and hullers. And there was also Amadeo Obasi. Obasi is the quintessential American success story. He immigrated from Italy when he was a child and sold peanuts on the streets of Pennsylvania. He moved to the Source in 1908, forming Planters Nut and Chocolate Company in Suffolk. Anthony Gentile drew the first Mr. Peanut, and Planters' personality was born. The late 19th and early 20th century also saw Nansemond County's first high school, electric plant, and telephone service. In 1903, George Walton brought the first car to the area. It was quickly outlawed.
No auto or other vehicle producing a sound liable to frighten a horse shall be propelled through the streets of Suffolk.
Obviously, this ordinance didn't last. Times were not prosperous for everyone. African Americans still faced discrimination. They had difficulty getting loans, work, and even school supplies. Everything was separate. Ruby Walden remembers growing up in the segregated South.
Black schools were not afforded the same facilities, the same supplies, the same teachers.
African Americans were discouraged from voting through poll taxes and other methods.
And aside from paying the poll tax, you could go to a registrar to register you, and he would have a long list of questions to ask, something that I'm sure he couldn't answer himself. And if you didn't answer these questions or give him some kind of answer, that was an excuse to keep from registering you.
But African Americans were undaunted by the times. They found ways to get what they needed. When no school buses were provided by the city, the parents bought them. They started Nansemond Collegiate, a private school, to make up for what the public education lacked.
I went through the 4 years of high school there, taking all the courses that they offered. English, math, trigonometry, all the other courses, and finished up as president of the class. Sometimes there were as many as 400 or 500 students there with athletics and all of the courses that you needed.
African Americans also found some prosperity in farming. More and more farmers became landowners. By 1925, Nansemond County had nearly 2,000 farms. The four-county and Suffolk fairs were outgrowths of this farming society. Cyprus native Irene Brinkley Harrell remembers attending the four-county fair yearly.
They had like farm women and farm exhibits of all agricultural type things. It was more that type thing, and then music, I think, more than anything else, and horses. They used to have horse shows at the fairgrounds.
The Suffolk Fair was organized by the African American community and drew large crowds.
And it was owned by us. It was something that you could be proud of because it was bought and it was operated by the black community.
Another farming celebration came to Suffolk in 1941, the first Peanut Festival.
They had a huge pile of peanuts in the street and elephants eating the peanuts. The peanut queens had dresses covered in peanuts. They wore peanut gowns. They invited a movie star to come be one of the peanut queens, and then all the areas around here sent representatives to be queens. And there were floats and just all kinds of celebrations.
The Peanut Festival was also a time of patriotism. War was raging in Europe, and within months, America would be heavily involved. In December 1941, just 2 months after Suffolk celebrated, the News – Herald announced Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. Men were sent to fight in Europe and the Pacific. Some women took over the factory jobs, while others entertained servicemen stationed near Suffolk. The city became home to many prisoners of war who were sent to a camp on South Saratoga Street. 42 of Suffolk and Nansemond County's men died in the war. A memorial at Cedar Hill Cemetery honors their service. Those who returned would see a new Suffolk. After the war, industry went far beyond peanuts. Lipton Tea, General Electric, Coca-Cola, and other companies came to Suffolk. Lady Bird Johnson even passed through on the Whistle Stop campaign for her husband.
Well, Saturday and Monday and Tuesday and most nights we had a drugstore, Russell's Drugstore, which is exactly where the Mills Godwin Courts building is. And that was a hangout for high school students. And then out at Elephant's Fork, there was a place called the Dairy Bar, and we spent a lot of time out there. And just enjoyed each other's company. We did things that were, we thought, a lot of fun at that time.
And then right on Main Street in Suffolk, we had two nice theaters. The Cavalier, that was more Western type movies, and across the street was the Chadwick.
There were uncertain times, too. Virginia did not escape the controversy of the civil rights movement of the 60s. Ruby Walden and other African Americans worked with an NAACP lawyer for equalization before integration was mandated by the Supreme Court. Her children were among the first to break the color barrier in schools.
And it wasn't easy. They went through much because it was new to the kids and they weren't used to it. Our kids were not used to it, but for the sake of what needed to be done, what had to be done, somebody had to do it.
African Americans made other strides as well. In 1963, Moses Riddick became the first black member of City Council since Reconstruction. Suffolk and Nansemond County were about to experience the biggest change of all. The two cities became one in a 1974 merger.
Well, the majority of the voters were for it. As I recall, I think it was somewhere almost 80% voted for it. And the two cities got together, the constitutional officers, the city managers, and the merger was very smooth. We didn't really have any problems at all.
The merger put the city of Suffolk merged with the city of Nansemond, making the population almost 50,000 people.
The last 25 years have seen Suffolk change a lot. This once sleepy little town is now a growing city that's attracted companies like QVC, Allied Colloids, and the U.S. Atlantic Command's Joint Training Center. Planters Peanuts and Lipton Tea still call Suffolk home. As a Virginia Main Street community, public and private sectors in Suffolk are working together to preserve historic downtown. A few years ago, the storefronts were empty, the streets abandoned. Now, downtown is hopping, due in part to a new 95,000 square foot courthouse. Northern Suffolk has become the home of high tech in Hampton Roads, as well as the site of growing suburbs. But with dedication to Suffolk's past, surrounding farmland is being preserved, Riddick's Folly has been turned into a house museum, and there are plans to restore the train station on Main Street to its original glory. The future is bright.
And Suffolk is a city that has a grand opportunity to lead the way and be a pattern for other cities. We are rural and we're urban. We have people from all walks of life. We have people who have come here and people who have been here and gone other places that have served in high places, that have been good examples for all of us.
Much of Suffolk's story remains unwritten, but with the continued commitment of its citizens, the story will likely have a happy ending.